In this tutorial, I will cover file management. I've put some labeled files and folders in different locations on the computer. Here's one on the desktop. If I look on the computer's hard drive, see there's one here. Also on this secondary hard drive, there's a few files, and here's a folder with some folders inside and some files inside those folders. First thing I'd like to show you is how to rename a file. To rename a file, you just click over its name, wait, and click a second time. A dialog box comes up and you can rename the file. Simple as that. Next, let's talk about duplicating a file. This will also work on a folder. If I go to the file and I hold the Control key on the keyboard and I click on the file or folder, I get a contextual menu, and one of the items is duplicate. So I can choose that. It makes a duplicate of that file and names it copy. I can do the same thing with a folder. Let's look on the student hard drive. Here's a folder. Hold down the Control key, click on the folder, choose duplicate. Now I have a copy, and notice it has all of the folders inside of it and the files inside. So that's a quick way if you need to duplicate an entire project that has folders and files that are associated with it. Okay, I'm going to throw those copies away. I can use the contextual menu for that as well. I'll click on this copy. I'll hold down the Control key, click, move to trash. It moves the folder and everything inside to the trash. Same with this one. Control key, click, move to trash. Now they're all in the trash can. Alright, if you're working on a project and you have files archived on a flash drive and you've taken some of those files and thrown them into the trash, they're actually still on your flash drive taking up space. So if you want to reclaim space, if you don't have enough space for whatever you're copying on your flash drive or whatever, be sure you choose Finder Empty Trash after you've thrown them away. That will erase them from the disk. It'll ask you to be sure. Say OK, they're gone. That's a way to reclaim space. Next, we'll cover moving, copying, and overwriting a file. Moving a file simply means changing its location on the same disk. I'll open this disk here. I could take this file, drag it into this folder, and I've now moved it to this folder. Go ahead and put it back where it was. Copying means to make a duplicate copy on another disk. Whenever you drag a file from one disk to another, it leaves the original copy and makes a new copy on the target disk. That's different from moving it around on the same disk. So let's open up the Macintosh hard disk. For example, I could take this file and drag it the same way but onto a different disk and release it. Now I have the original copy here, and I have a second copy on the target disk. That's called copying. I could do the same thing with a folder. Let's drag this folder. Here's my original folder with the folders and files inside. Here's a copy. Notice it has all the files and folders inside. I'm going to throw these away now. And empty the trash. Okay, overwriting a file means to drag a file, a copy of a file, from one disk to another disk where there's a file with exactly the same name. This can be dangerous because you could possibly overwrite a file that you've worked on with an older version and lose all your changes. Here's an example of that. There's a file called File Management 3 on my student disk and also one on the Macintosh hard disk. I'll try dragging this file over here and we get a warning box. An item named File Management 3 already exists. Do you want to replace it? So what will happen is the file here will be erased and replaced with a file from here. So if this was the file I was working on and has new changes, and this is an old version, I will have lost my new changes. So I'm going to say stop. A better way of saving changes to a file is to rename the file and then drag it. So I'm going to call this, let's say, version 2. Let's say I know that this is the file that I've been working on and updating. Now when I drag that to the other disk, the original older version remains, and I have a second copy which is of this newer version. So by changing the name, you're always safe to not overwrite a previous version. So that's a good idea when jumping back and forth between an archive disk and the computer's hard disk. I'm going to throw those out. Okay, I'd now like to do kind of a realistic scenario like you would use for projects or sessions you do in the MIDI lab. Whenever you create a music session or project, you will have a folder with a bunch of subfolders and files that are all associated to one main file. They all need to remain together in the project folder at all times for the file to function properly. So I'll go through a scenario similar to what you might when you're working in the lab. Let's say I've been working on a project and I have it backed up on a flash drive. I'll put my flash drive in. There's my flash drive. I'll open it up, and as I will say on all the projects, you never work on a project while it's saved on your flash drive. You always work with the hard drive that's in the computer because of the reading and writing speed. So I'll take this project and I'm going to put it on the student drive. There's no project with this name, so I can safely drag it. It's going to make a copy of the folder and all of its contents. There it is. Okay. Now that I'm done with that, I can eject my flash drive so I don't accidentally work on the file that's there. And I will open my file in progress. And let's say I do some changes. I'll do a little bit of recording here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I've added to my file. So I'll choose Save. And then I'll choose to quit. Whenever you're copying a file from one disk to another, be sure you have quit the application. That makes sure that you saved the most recent changes. Okay, so here is my project folder with all these folders inside. Here's my file. Notice it's been changed very recently, so this is my newest version. Okay, now I'll put my flash drive back in. And if I were to drag this updated version of my project here, it will warn me that there's a copy of this folder there with all the inside files. I could replace it, but a better idea is probably to rename this version, at least the folder, and then copy the project folder. This is also a good idea even if I feel like I want to overwrite the old project, because let's say you've done some changes, but later on down the line you want to refer back to your original version. Maybe you like that one better. This makes sure that you save the original version plus the newer version. So each time I copy back to my archive disk, I always rename my project folder as the latest version. So I save all the older versions. Okay, I'm going to throw those away for the moment. Now there's one other issue of file management that's very important when you're working with music projects. As we see in this folder, there's a control file here. This is a digital performer file, plus all of these subfolders which have their own files in them. In order for this digital performer file to function properly, it needs to read all of these other files, and they need to be in the correct location, which means they are all contained in this project folder. So whenever you move onto the hard disk or off, you want to carry the entire project folder and all of its contents. I'll show you what happens if I make a mistake and I don't take the project folder. Let's say I just take this file and copy it. Okay, I'll eject my flash drive. And I'll open up my Digital Performer project file by double-clicking it. Okay, the launch of the program looks like it's going fine up until here. Now notice it says missing sound files. This file, audio 1, was one of the files in one of those subfolders in my project folder. Digital Performer needs that file in order to play back the recording I made correctly. So if you don't bring the project folder and just the file, you will be missing required files or associated files. So when I look at my project, I notice that there's a gray line here. That means it's missing files and it won't play back properly. So always drag your entire project folder from one disk to another. And when you've completed your work and are archiving that folder, always rename it with a later version to save your earlier versions.